Welcome to The Authentic Spiritual Journey, a weekly podcast featuring real and practical spiritual conversations from fresh perspectives here on the Experience of the Soul podcast channel. Today, episode 256, Spiritual Healing for Sexual Issues, Part 2. And now your host, Reverend Cynthia Alice Anderson.
Hello and welcome to the Authentic Spiritual Journey. My name is Cynthia Alice Anderson. I'm the host. I'm here today in 818 Studios with my producer.
Good morning, everybody. This is Dave Croft, and thank you so much for joining us for another episode of the Authentic Spiritual Journey. It's episode 256.
Boom,
wow.
Boom.
That's a lot of episodes. I know. I sound every week. I sound flabbergasted all over again because it's a big deal. 256 episodes.
Passing 250 was definitely a milestone. Yeah. And as a matter of fact, I'm glad you said that because it brings up the point. I'm always considering adding another show.
Anybody, like to the channel?
Yeah, to the channel. I mean, that I would do. I just I keep wondering if not wondering, here's let me rephrase it. The idea of doing a show about business on this channel, because so many of our listeners are really successful in the business world, even though they're mostly highly spiritual, it might be nice to do something about business and conscious business. So if that sounds interesting to you, give me a little email or text and let me know. And you can contact me through the experienceofthesoul.com website or my site that I use for all my speaking engagements and courses, which is cynthiaaliceanderson.com. So feel free to
links to those in the show notes.
Yeah, that'll always be in the show notes. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, 256, and it's been a good week, and here we are, mid-May.
Right.
You know, the weather has, in Florida, you know, it got really rainy for a while, you know. Well, it goes from like no rain to torrential rain, and then it just settles into our pattern. So
into our pattern of every single day.
Right, exactly.
I know every time I leave the house, it's like, should I just wear a rash guard? Because I'm clearly going to get wet today.
Yeah, and it's like me and the motorcycle. I can't ride as confidently. Like I can't take it out and know I have to start checking the weather. You know,
yeah,
as far as like if I'm going to get rained on.
I've been really wanting a motorcycle, I have to admit, but I think it's going to be a jet ski instead. It's probably safer.
Oh my gosh. Jet ski.
Yeah, afraid so.
All right.
So, we'll just hold the high watch for me. Yep. Okay. I've been really loving the water, and so we'll see.
Yeah, very cool.
We'll see. Cool. Yep, we'll see. Well, there's, I was explaining recently, it was actually in a message at Unity North Tampa. It just kind of came out this way. I wasn't necessarily intending to share this personal fact, but you know, when you do grow up in a lot of trauma, you're used to a lot of things going on at once. Well, I've basically removed any drama from my life. So I have to put some drama back in.
Right.
But my drama is intentional, and it's called excitement or fun. That's what most people call it. Adventure, right. Most people call that fun. Some people would call it torture, though. It depends on the kind of person you are. But, you know, I love to challenge myself. I love to try new things. And it's definitely been, a year of that, more boating than ever before. So I've been really having a good time with these new challenges. And my personal fitness is, strong commitment there, which is also most people my age would say I'm too old, to do it, to do jujitsu. But I'm having the time of my life, and I haven't been in, better shape in 20 years. It's probably the best shape I've ever been in, except for maybe when I was in high school playing ball and running 4 days a week.
Yeah, I got to tell you, I'm creeping up on 50, right?
Yeah.
It's my last year. I'll be 50 this year, and I don't know if it's just the perspective of being the one who's getting older, but I remember when I was, in high school and in my 20s, seeing people who were 50. And seeing pictures of people who were 50.
Yeah.
Like seeing my grandparents and seeing my parents when they were this age. I don't know. There wasn't a youthfulness And I don't know if that's just perspective. I don't know if that's the internet kind of making everything much more, there's a permanence, to media and movies and that
True,
kind
true.
I don't know, but I feel like 50 is the new 60. No, the new
the new
30.
40. The new
Or
30.
40, yep.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because there are several people that are older than me in jiu-jitsu. Several of them have more injuries as well. But it's been really great to challenge myself on the physical level, because everybody who listens know I'm always challenging myself on the spiritual level, on the emotional level, seeking to heal. And so it's really fun for me to do, to participate in all these other outward ways. So anyway, it's fun that now my excitement is chosen. and,
That's right.
and now I'm not just living in a trauma drama, but my excitement is fun. And actually teaching a teenager to drive is full of adventure as well. And that's been a blast. That's been a blast.
How is he doing with it?
Fantastic. I'm really, he's doing fantastic, and we're laughing most of the time. So that's really good. My parents were great at stuff like that, actually. Yeah. So, but by the time I got a learner's permit, I had been driving, for nearly 10 years, either go-karts or things, lawnmowers, different than kids today. Most kids at 15 haven't driven a lot, but I had. So I wasn't sure how my son would do, but he's having a great time. So.
Yeah, he would love that jet ski too, I'm sure. He'd have a blast. Is there like a minimum age you have to be to ride a jet?
Now, that's a good question. I don't know. I'm still learning all the facts about it. But, we know the models. So,
yep. There you go.
And they're quite stable and quite safe, actually. So.
Yeah. They're more stable than a motorcycle is.
Yeah, exactly. And they go fast, which is a lot of fun. They go 60 miles an hour.
Oof.
Yeah. So
on water.
On water. To me, that sounds like a blast.
Yeah. Very cool.
There was one guy I was talking to who was selling his jet skis, and he was going to take them to the Bahamas. I said, well, can you actually ride a jet ski to the Bahamas? Like, that's what I mean. I'm learning all this stuff. And he goes, yeah, it takes about 2 to 3 hours. I was like, but you'll be out in open, like, I don't know, 12,000 feet deep water? I don't know.
Like cruise ship depth.
Like cruise ship depth. I'm not sure that's going to be for me.
On a jet ski. I hope you brought enough gas.
Right. I was going to say, that may be past my threshold of excitement.
Yeah, but I guess you could go out there and run a casino out on your jet ski.
Yeah, you could. That was funny. Well, and it's really interesting that we're talking about taking chances, because the topic today is a new one for us on the channel, and I felt so strongly guided to do it, and so honored that we can. And as I was re-listening to the last show, I thought, if I had never heard this show before, and I heard this deep of a topic talked about in this way, it would really help my whole life. And it's a pretty serious topic. So Dave, give us the title, if you will.
Yeah, it's a part 2 of spiritual healing for sexual issues. So last week we did part 1, and today is part 2.
Well, and I re-listened to the show. I want to tell you that because there was so much in there, and I didn't want to overly plan my comments, because I'm really listening to Spirit as I'm sharing this, and I'm also reminded of the various clients over the last year or two that have really benefited from this teaching, which is why I wanted to bring it forward. In spiritual circles, I want to reiterate this. In spiritual circles, we don't often talk about some of the most real topics that are going on in our lives. We talk about how it's great to meditate, which it is. We talk about how it's great to pray, which it is. We talk about affirmations, but we often forget the body. And so what has happened a little bit in spiritual circles is people that want to experience the body in a different way will, or experience healing at the level of the body, will take up yoga. They might take up a martial arts, or even running, or something of that nature. Well, the interesting thing is that all of those can be synthesized, if you will, in the spiritual journey. And I think it's so important that we do discuss it, because it looks like from the world standpoint that your spirituality is over here, your sexuality is over here, your physical body is over here. It's very disjointed, very, I think, as we said last show, compartmentalized. But in fact, we are one complete being. We often say we are spirit, soul, and body. And I also use this phrase: we are spiritual beings living in a spiritual universe that is governed by spiritual law. Okay. Having said that, so we believe all of what you're experiencing is spiritual. We believe that all of what you are dialing through now has a spiritual purpose. We also believe that whatever is dogging you, whatever is in your face right now to heal is healable at the spiritual. Having said that, it doesn't have to be only spiritual that you heal through. It can be a variety of modalities. It can be a variety of tactics in healing a certain issue. As a matter of fact, you often need more than one tactic. But my concern in our culture, and I mentioned this in the last show, so if you didn't get that show, I want you to go back and hear it, because there's a lot of introduction, that in our culture, we're starting to only believe in science or only believe in psychology, and we're forgetting the faith, or rather the spiritual aspect. I mentioned last week, and I want to reiterate this as well, that if you're a man and you have a problem sexually, you're put on a pill. If you're a woman, you're often put on hormones and or told you need surgery. And in some extreme cases, that is the case, right? I'm not a doctor. I'm not telling you don't go to a doctor, because oftentimes there is medical help that's needed, or there may be psychological help. My point in all of this is that we don't forget how the spiritual can inform and heal. Not everything needs a pill, right? Not everything needs to be ratcheted up forcefully, that there is a way in the body that you can heal through the faith and through opening the various chakras, right? So we talked about last week that the chakras are an energetic spiritual system, or rather energetic points in the body, right? That when we work with them consciously can help us open spiritual energy, open the channels, right? And so if you've experienced sexual trauma, or as we talked about last week, if you've just been in a culture where everything is so overly sexualized, and when I say everything, what I'm really meaning is young girls are overly sexualized. It's rare you see similar images of boys. It's mostly young girls that are overly sexualized, that we all carry some kind of trauma simply because of how our culture has been over-sexualized. So we talked about last week, to start with in the chakras, to work with this affirmation, because each of the chakras really builds on this root chakra. And the first one we said, number one, I have the right to be here. I have the right to have. And I said last week, just work with this idea. I have the right to be here. I have the right to have. This is a really important idea, because if you don't believe you have the right to be here, you're already carrying shame simply for existing. And I would venture to say, 80% of the country is here, maybe more, depending on the time you grew up. Some of these messages were louder than others. So I have the right to be here on this planet. I have the right to have. That's number one. First chakra that lives at the base of the spine, that lowest bone of the spine is kind of where that energy lives. And so we talked about meditating on it, and even sitting down on the beach, sitting on the ground, wherever you might be, and thinking on this idea, meditating on this idea, saying this idea out loud. I have the right to be here on this planet. I have the right to have. That's the basis for knowing the energy in all the other chakras. That's chakra one. today we're going to look at the next two chakras because we're really talking about, again, the title is Spiritual Healing for Sexual Issues. And so that second chakra, which is sacral center, that's the place of your sexual organs, is really, really important to healing energy in your sexual life. The affirmation for this chakra is, I have the right to create. I have the right to my sexuality and pleasure. I have the right to create. I have the right to my sexuality and pleasure. So this chakra is super important. I cannot emphasize, if you are dealing with sexual trauma, to honor this aspect of the body. Now, when I'm saying honor this aspect of the body, if you are participating in sexual addiction, then this is going to be a really important time for you to abstain and work with this chakra and work with these thoughts and affirmations. Because remember, we said last week that we're going to be working with visualization, we're going to be working with affirmation, and there may be some new behaviors. If you're in sexual addiction, having sex multiple times, sometimes it's a day, sometimes it's multiple partners as well. That is a sexual acting out. So the way to work with that is to abstain from the behavior and work with this idea. So if you're listening to this and you're participating in that behavior of sexual addiction, you may be saying, I can't live without it. Well, that's the emotional side. That's the belief side of this particular issue. You think you can't live without it the same way an alcoholic thinks they can't live without a drink. And in fact, the behavior is keeping you from real, beautiful, sacred sexual connection. I'm going to say it this way. Getting off is not the same as a sacred sexual connection. And if you're participating in sexual addiction right now, you don't know there is a difference. You don't know there is a difference between acting out sexual activity and a real sacred sexual connection. So the reason I'm telling you to abstain is so you can do some clearing out work of some of this energy. Every person you're ever intimate with, you carry that energy with you in a really powerful way. Even if you think it's anonymous, even if you think it's when it's over, that isn't true energetically. It's not true emotionally. It's not true spiritually. It's not even true scientifically. STDs are passed, and doctors say whoever you've been with, you are always carrying. Even with protected sex, oftentimes there is a way for STDs to transmit. So it's true on every level I know, spiritually, emotionally, sexually, physically. So if you want to heal this aspect of the body, then you're going to have to pause some of those activities and think about this new way of looking at this issue. I have the right to create. I have the right of my sexuality and pleasure. Pleasure is different from addiction. So now the same affirmation was so interesting. The same affirmation, the same work of visualization I'm going to get to is the same if you are acting out and having sex multiple times a day, multiple partners a week, than if you're totally and completely blocked and cannot experience any sexuality and pleasure. Both situations can be healed through the use of visualization, through the use of this affirmation, through the use of meditating on this aspect of the body and these ideas. There's also some exercises. I mentioned the book last week by Anodea, Judith. There's some exercises that you can even do physically to help wake up that part of the body in a different way, in a much more spiritual way than you may be experiencing it, at the moment. So the phrase we work with, again, if you're blocked and cannot participate in sexual activity with, your intimate partners, the phrase is, I have the right to create. I have the right of my sexuality and pleasure. Simply thinking on this idea and centering your attention on your sexual organs begins to open and activate the chakra. It also, as you do this work, may bring up memories of if there is past trauma in relationships. And that's where the emotional work comes in. That's where you might need therapeutic work as well. But again, knowing that the light in you is the most powerful, knowing that God is with you, knowing that wherever you are, God is. Remembering that you are a sacred being. This could also bring healing to you without ever going to a therapist. So yes, you may need other therapeutic work here, and you may not. In all the cases of the people I've worked with, they've handled it completely spiritually. But sometimes you need emotional support if there was a great deal of trauma. So get it if you need it. There's also a wonderful modality of therapeutic work called EMDR that helps you basically rewire the brain that can be super, super helpful in healing sexual trauma. Right? So if you do have a therapist and you're starting to work with this spiritually, that's something to bring into the sessions so you're getting the right support on it. But only taking a pill or only thinking something is wrong with you, those modalities are often based in shame. And I want you to hear me say, there's no shame in needing to heal. We all have aspects of us we need to heal. So the affirmation we're working with in healing our sexual issues is the affirmation for the second chakra, as I learned it from Anodea Judith, which is, I have the right to create. I have the right of my sexuality and pleasure. Now, if you've experienced a lot of trauma, you may even want to visualize a protective image out in front of your body as you do this visualization work, because it might feel vulnerable to think about this even if you're alone at home. So if that feels vulnerable or scary, imagine bringing in a strong image of protection. I have one along today. If you're watching on YouTube, you can look. Here's Wonder Woman. She's a protective image. I know you thought I was going to say bring in Jesus. You can do that too. But as a woman, I love the idea of bringing in Wonder Woman as a protector if I'm doing my sacred work with my sacred sexuality, with her as my protection. It's a visualization knowing I'm safe, I'm protected, I'm loved in this, and nothing is going to get through. She has a golden lasso and a sword. Right. So I'm going to be safe and protected. And these are archetypal images of protection. So the affirmation for healing this second chakra is, I have the right to create. I have the right of my sexuality and pleasure. Also, if you're starting to do this deeper work, you may need other support. Well, that's where, spiritual counseling comes in. That's one of the many things that I do to support people on the journey. And so you might need a couple of appointments. No problem. No problem. That's exactly what I'm here for. That's what the therapeutic work is for. Now, as you're working with this, as you're visualizing, as you're thinking about it, I'm going to encourage you not to look at sexualized images, not to be on your phone, not to do anything other than work in the spiritual realm, so that you begin to cultivate a relationship with this part of your body that is sacred. The affirmation again for this second chakra is, I have the right to create. I have the right of my sexuality and pleasure. First and second chakra are paramount in healing any issue, because that basis of number one is the basis of basically your spine, your tree of life, right? That goes in the body. And the second chakra is even if you have a block. I was working with an author at one time who was blocked in their process. And I said, well, this is a second chakra issue. And they were like, what do you mean a second chakra issue? I said, all creation is from that second chakra, right? That's a place we make babies. It's the place of creation itself, right? So even if you're blocked and it's not sexual, the answer could lie in that second chakra. So I want to make sure and mention that. If you're blocked on an idea, you need to work with second chakra. If you're blocked in moving forward on a project, you work with second chakra. But first, with first chakra, right? Because that's the grounding point. That's the grounding point. So if you're blocked sexually or you're blocked in these other ways I mentioned, one of the ways to work with it physically, so I've talked about using this affirmation. I've talked about visualizing a little bit, and the visualizing is really about golden light surrounding your sexual organs. Golden light surrounding your sexual organs, knowing you're safe, knowing you're loved, knowing you're protected, knowing all is well, and then bringing this statement to mind: I have the right to create. I have the right of my sexuality and pleasure. And this is done in the comfort of your own home, in a space that's very protected, and visualizing a protective image if you need. Well, the physical movement is often a rocking back and forth. That's a very sexual motion. Or sometimes it's the twisting of the hips as well, right? So that if you look at the book, the Anodea Judith book, all those are in there. But sometimes you need to just wake up that part of your body. Some people would call it a pelvic tilt. It's a lot like riding horses. One of the ways I healed much of my sexual trauma was through horseback riding, because of the movement of the horse and that releasing my hips in a way. Right? I didn't know at that time that's what was happening, but the more I learned about the chakras and the work I was doing, the more I became aware that simply that movement was helping me heal. So the affirmation for chakra 1 is, I have the right to be here. I have the right to have. And the second chakra, dealing with our sexual issues again, is I have the right to create. I have the right of my sexuality and pleasure. So friends, as you work with this, my hope is that you're going to come into greater awareness of the fact that you are a spiritual being, and that your sexuality is simply an important aspect of the way that you create, of the way that you express in the world. My hope for you is that if there is sexual trauma, that you would be willing to seek healing in this aspect of your body. My hope for you is that you will honor the needs and desires of your sexual life, but also not be an addiction, that you are in beautiful balance with the most sacred aspect of you. This is a vulnerable aspect. It's one we don't talk about in spirituality, but is very, very important to you experiencing all the good God has for you. My hope for you is, rather than living in this over-sexualized idea, that you will again come into balance, that you will again come into balance with who you really are, that you are spirit, soul, and body, that you are a spiritual being living in a spiritual universe governed by spiritual law, and that you will include the sexual aspect of you on your spiritual journey. So I'm wishing you the best, friend, in your process. I'm here to support you if something comes up, obviously, and happy to support you on the journey. And we are honored that you listen, honored that you are giving to the show and keeping us on the air as always. And we're lifting you up for all good in your life and in your world. So we look forward to seeing you next week, and blessings on the journey, dear friend.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode of The Authentic Spiritual Journey here on the Experience of the Soul podcast channel. This channel is made possible because of listeners just like you. If you would like to support the channel with your tax-deductible contribution on an ongoing basis or through a one-time gift, head over to experienceofthesoul.com patreon.com/support. The Authentic Spiritual Journey is copyright 2023, Cynthia Alice Anderson, all rights reserved. Our theme music is composed by Dave Croft and used with permission from RR Hot Publishing. The Experience of the Soul podcast channel is a production of 818 Studios.